Chapter 9, Kiriko Activates. Clear Naya. Clear Naya. Clear Naya. The voices of the cat fairies happily flying around the bridge echoed. No matter how far apart they could connect their consciousness to each other, so they acted as a warning system in the event of an emergency. Of course, detailed emergency information needed to be communicated via hyperspace communication, but they were simply faster at issuing the initial warning. All departments are clear. Our cooperation with the Recepshi security forces is also going well. However, requests for information disclosure from the media continue to come in non-stop through various channels. Although the PR department says that all broadcasting rights for the ceremony belong to Recepshi, they're trying to exploit small openings in the private relationships of staff members to obtain information. It's an event of this magnitude, so I understand how they feel. Kagaya also told me that even the lowest-ranking mechanic apprentices were contacted. It's really troubling. Kiriko and the girls were currently renting one of the Recepshi's event venues. This was a first-class venue that only royalty and nobility could rent, and holding an audience there was an act that made Kiriko's status in Recepshi clear. However, this was merely a performance for those who only knew the common sense of Renza. Those connected to the Galactic Federation knew that the base within Kamadake, where selected people would head after the ceremony, was a place of far higher status than the venue for the audience. This was because even members of the royal family could not just enter that place if they wished, as it was a mass of secrets built using the secret techniques of the Galactic Academy's highest-ranking philosopher, Hakubi Washu. Even if they came to know this someday, for the time being, this place was a more effective way to inform the people of the Renza of the meaning of Kiriko's existence. What's wrong? You seem unusually nervous. Haido Ukin, the water-rank knight, spoke to the young knight, who was sitting on the gorgeous sofa with his back straight and stiff. It was inevitable in this lounge that the appearance of a new graduate going for an interview at a large company was out of place, but it was not fitting for the privileged clientele that usually came here. Is this definitely the place? Is it okay for me to be here? Yes, there's no mistake. So, just relax a little. Even if you say so, I'm so out of place. Seeing how extremely tense he looked, Ukin felt sorry for him rather than giving him a wry smile. Well, I understand how you feel. I've only been in that corner of the lobby once before. Although it was called a lobby, it was more like a huge garden. The elevated area in the center, where they were, was the space for the main personalities, such as royalty and nobility, and the area around it was for their servants. And beyond that, on the other side of the screen in the corner, was the waiting area for guards like them. In Kao, there was a family name that was only allowed for royal knights, which no longer existed. It used numbers 1 through 8 and the character for rank, and the higher the number, the higher the rank. Of course, even the lowest rank, Haido, was still a prestigious family. If Haido Ukin felt that way, it was no wonder that young high-ranking knights were so nervous. Even so, there's quite a diverse group of people gathered here. Ukin quietly sensed his surroundings, careful not to be rude. Some were expelled from the 5 royal knights, and others were beheaded in that duel. There are also some other strangers, but if a princess from a foreign land is summoning them, it's only natural that the group will be a mixed bunch. When the sons of the 5 royal families became independent, their vassals were distributed among them based on their previous relationships. Either way, if they wanted to start their own families, they would need to have the necessary connections and contacts. However, in Kiriko's case, she was unable to receive full support from Kao, and she was practically picking a fight with Renza. Moreover, when summoned by a foreign princess, it was only natural that all sorts of people with a gambling mentality would gather. But still, it's a bit odd. Knights and those of that ilk all had a common air about them, but some had a different smell. I mean his behavior, or rather his gaze. That night. As Ukin pondered this, the young knight frowned slightly. He looked at a figure leaning on the drink bar, drinking heavily. This knight was notorious for his immaturity and poor behavior with women. Although he held the rank of Water Knight, he was shunned by others due to the numerous troubles he caused with women. The man was calm even among the tense knights, enjoying the expensive-looking alcohol that he normally couldn't afford. It was true that everything at the drink bar was free, and even if he was drunk the alcohol would break down instantly, So Ukin could understand the desire to take this opportunity to drink some high-end or rare alcohol that he normally couldn't afford. However, considering the upcoming ceremony, his behavior was a little inappropriate and damaging to his image. Well, he's got a lot of skill, and I want to emulate that kind of boldness. I hope you don't show that boldness to your master, the princess. I hope she's not that unreasonable. But judging from how she fought, there's a high chance she'll be defeated, and above all, her husband is a godly knight. That's certainly. That knight was said to be skilled at riding armored cavalry, but his fighting skills were poor, so if he actually did it, he would just be laughed at by everyone for being infatuated and out of his league. In fact, if he did that to a princess of the Jurai royal family, who became more and more powerful the higher they rose, he would be killed instantly. Perhaps the short conversation had eased some of the tension, as the young knight quenched his thirst with the untouched drink placed in front of him. He looked surprised, as if he had been overwhelmed by the delicious taste. That was understandable, as the ingredients used in the drink were quite rare and could not be obtained simply by paying money. If he wanted to taste the same thing again in the future, he would have to spend decades raising his status to reach that level. But changing the subject, I heard that Okindano was involved in the testing of our armored cavalry. Of course I have seen the data, but I think it's best to do something like this directly. Well, there are probably many aspects that can't be understood without experiencing it for yourself, and it's something that a knight would be interested in. At that moment, the attention of those around him turned to Ukin. Aside from Ukin, there were several other people present who were taking part in the testing of the new knight, but there were many who didn't know any of them and wanted to get as much information as possible. Well, they haven't been told to keep it a secret, so it probably doesn't matter to the people gathered here. Ukin pretended not to notice and began to speak. May I join in the conversation, Haido Dano? Without anyone realizing it, the frivolous knight who had been drinking at the counter approached them, holding a bottle and glass in his hands. Oh, that's fine, Kobek Fudasujidano. With Ukin's permission, Kobek pulled the sofa over to Ukin's side and poured a new glass of sake before handing it to him. Ukin accepted it and only took a quick sip, but if it weren't for this situation, he would have been tempted to drink it all, since it was a drink he had always wanted to try. The Sacred Mechalord is an interesting system. It is completely synchronized with the body of each individual knight, so it feels like the armored cavalry itself becomes the body of the knight. Oh, so it's a direct link system type? No, Kobek Dano. It's more mysterious, or rather, more moving. It's more direct and stress-free than any other armored cavalry I have ever piloted. However, so does that mean the abilities of the armored cavalry depend on the abilities of the knight? Those are just the abilities of the base unit. Then you add in the brain unit and equipment, so it takes some getting used to and time to adjust, but this is just my impression, but that omnipotence is incredible. It's almost groundbreaking. I see. So, where can I access the combat databanks? That's what mattered most to Kobek, as he combined that data to create his own unique style of fighting. Unfortunately, that's probably only Cow. Am I a little early on this one? Well, I wouldn't say that. Oh, and at that moment, a staff member announced the meeting. There's no need to panic. You'll understand soon enough. In the meantime, you'd better sober up. The main hall was a huge circular crystal dome, and outside, the Cathedral of Recepci could be seen overlooking it. In the middle of a vast garden that looked like a pattern on the endless sea, the cathedral sparkled in the sunlight. Hey. It was a building that symbolized Recepci, which was shown at the opening of New Year's celebrations and other important events. It was unclear whether the scenery was filmed or real, but either way, it was not something that could be easily obtained permission for, and the mere fact that it could be used showed how Recepci recognized Kiriko's status. It also allowed those who were unfamiliar with the Galactic Federation to visually understand Kiriko's status. Okindano, overwhelmed by the atmosphere, the young knight spoke in a trembling voice. But that was how everyone gathered there felt. All I know is that she is a princess from a great nation, but considering that Recepci treats her with the utmost respect, that must be the case. Ukin felt that his was an extremely insignificant existence. Just as he was trying to catch his breath and not be crushed by those feelings, the music playing in the venue stopped. There was complete silence. It was almost frightening. A plate resembling a shimmering water surface appeared before them, and on it appeared enlarged 3D images of the main staff, the water rank generals. Then small gasps could be heard all around. Cao is pretty serious about this. He was a skilled and capable general from Cao who was known to all knights and their associates. Next were the heaven-ranked generals, Saoren and Sajiu, along with 2 others. At that moment, a murmur arose from the participants. They, one of whom is male, were famous figures who were also knights outside of Cao. In particular, Saoren was so captivating that even those who did not know him, cannot help but be drawn in. Next up were Fuku and Di, who, along with the godly knight, had become quite famous. Miki and Kerchi also exuded a certain atmosphere with their costumes and decorations. And Amain, Ryoko, and Niju, due to their backgrounds, had a tremendous presence. In addition to the stage effects, Niju's ability to control the collective consciousness also added to the atmosphere. And then, click-clack, click-clack, click-clack. Impressive footsteps echoed through the air as Kariko entered from the right side of the stage. Amazing! Anyone who saw Kariko walking could tell that her strength was not average. However, in a match, Ukin would likely be able to beat her, and there were many masters who were better than her. But in a real fight, to be honest, from Ukin's perspective, Kariko's duel was sloppy in many ways. She was helped in many ways by her opponent's inexperience, and it also felt like she was overwhelmed by the godly knight, which she was not used to. There were problems with dueling in that state, but she didn't take any damage. Her handling of the numerous opponents was extraordinary, with no failures whatsoever. And as the duel progressed, her control of the godly knight became more and more refined. The problem was the process, not the result. The movements of the godly knight, Yamatsu Ukami, during the duel were like watching a fast-forwarded process of the pilot's first time piloting it with almost no training, and then several years of training to become proficient. By the end, even Ukin was no match for it. The performance of our armored cavalry is quite high, but at the same time, there are some concerns. It's difficult to judge them. Just as Ukin was thinking this, Kariko's footsteps rang out with a loud click, and she stopped in the center of the stage. Then she slowly turned towards them. The atmosphere in the place changed instantly. Everyone there was intimidated by Kariko, and they were unable to move, as if they were paralyzed. This was a technique that Sito often used, but Kariko was not yet able to reach that level. That's why she was assisted by Niju's ability to direct the group consciousness in a certain direction. First of all, I would like to express my gratitude for accepting my invitation. Kariko began to speak quietly and solemnly. Combining the results of her short royal education, her experience seeing Emperor Jirai and Sito up close, and the power of Niju, she used this prestigious place, which intimidated most of the participants, as a stage to increase her dignity. Above all, this was all to help Sena, and Kariko's power increased instantly when it came to Sena. You have surely heard many rumors about me. I understand that you have doubts and worries. Therefore, I will not hide anything from you, but will reveal everything. And once you know the truth, I will not blame you for leaving. At that moment, the participants, especially the knight candidates, were shaken. They realized that they had suddenly been presented with a test of their faith. Let me make one thing clear before we begin. The Galactic Federation is far more powerful than you could ever imagine. Its scale and capabilities surpass those of Renza in every way, including military strength. While the armored cavalry is an excellent weapon on its own, without the dueling system, it will inevitably be overwhelmed by sheer numbers. If they are to be effective in single combat, they would need to be godly knight class, but the Galactic Federation has ships of the same class. While it is true that Renza has a slight edge in the technology and know-how of armored cavalry, you have seen it with your own eyes or in recorded footage, haven't you? The way the armored cavalry, which possesses the same power as Renza's 5 holy machines, was sliced apart in a duel by the godly knights. Oh! The cause of the uproar was the image of an Earth-based robot anime that was being projected. What's that? It's a video I've never seen before, but it's the story of the armored cavalry. Do you know it? No. This is the first time I've seen it. Those who were present all said so, but it seemed that their curiosity outweighed their doubts. The major difference between the Galactic Federation and the Renza Federation lay in their differing philosophies regarding combat. The former favored ship-to-ship combat, while the latter favored combat using armored cavalry. The Galactic Federation, which prioritized functional efficiency, and the Renza Federation, which worshipped armored cavalry as idols, were naturally incompatible. It is no wonder that you do not know. This is an entertainment film made on an early civilization planet within the Galaxy Federation space. That planet is the birthplace of my husband, the pilot of the Godly Knight. Hey, does that mean the Galactic Federation also has a concept of armored cavalry combat? The very fact that the Galactic Federation had a knight-like ideology was a shocking event. If it's a planet with an early civilization, doesn't that mean Yamata Sena is the only one? If it's an early civilization, then something like that might be possible. At the very least, that princess had the concept of armored cavalry combat in mind from the beginning. It was difficult to deal with a combat concept with a different philosophy. It was one thing to fight against it, but developing weapons and engaging in combat was extremely difficult. No matter how advanced science was, it took a long time to develop and collect combat data, and the same went for pilots. However, even if it was an entertainment video, if the concept was familiar, progress would be much faster than starting from scratch. Moreover, on planet Earth was Hakubi Washu, one of the leading scientists in the Galactic Federation. With the incident with Masaki Kenshi in mind, she gleefully created the god of destruction, Yamatsu Ukami. And the scientific knowledge of the Galactic Federation is far superior to that of Renza. As proof of this, the protection of all the brain tree units we have defeated has been completely deactivated. Oh! A murmur rose from the entire venue. Although it had been expected, the significance of Kariko stating the fact aloud was considerable. It clearly meant that Santen was now an enemy, and remaining there would mean agreeing with that decision. However, strangely, no one thought to leave the venue. In the first place, those who had the talent but were treated poorly in Renza had gathered in the hope of breaking out of that environment, so they were somewhat prepared to become enemies of Santen. Of course, the presence of the Godly Knight Zenvi and Kariko's Yamatsu Ukami, who showed overwhelming power, also played a major role. If they could develop the armored cavalry, especially the brain tree, without relying on Santen, there would be no need for them to bow down to Santen. And it was the numerous productions created by Kariko and her team that made them consider leaving Santen, which was in a sense taboo. From now on, you will no longer be able to receive maintenance from Santen. In the first place, we have no intention of entrusting our precious family to those who wield such immature technology. Behind Kariko and her team, a new type of psychogen the size of Yamatsu Ukami appeared. Oh! An even louder cheer erupted from the venue. The presence of the actual armored cavalry and the interest and anticipation they generated were indeed impressive. This new armored cavalry is the latest creation of the scientist who created my Godly Knight, Yamatsu Ukami. Depending on how well it works with the installed brain tree system, it has the potential to rival the Yamatsu Ukami. Cooperation, huh? In contrast to the excitement of the venue, Kobek gazed at the new model with a cool eye. However, he noticed something and quietly approached Uken amid the excitement of the venue. Ukendano, I'd like to follow up on the discussion we had earlier. Is that okay? Is this the one that can only use cow's data? Because it's important to me. Is there something going on? Kobek was thinking of leaving if there was nothing to be done. As if reading his thoughts, Uken kept watching the stage. It's the vast amount of data on human-to-human combat that Jurai possesses. If I say it's the data that the princess showed in her duel, you'll know what I mean, right? I see. Before long, Kobek's face was lit up with joy. Oh, come on. That's pretty stirring. The young man muttered while folding his arms and smiling cynically. He didn't seem to be in tune with the atmosphere in the venue, but there was an air of excitement. That princess has quite an impressive presence. I can see why she was feared over there. I like her. The short-haired woman had a grin on her face, bearing her fangs, and a well-trained physique. The third person, in contrast to the others, was small and at first glance looked like a young girl. She was silent as she looked at the armored cavalry. The three of them were lined up in the knight section, but unlike the other knights, they had a relaxed atmosphere about them. However, the people gathered here were a diverse bunch, to say the least, due to Kiriko's broad recruitment criteria, and some might even say they were a motley crew. As a result, they didn't stand out too much, but they were still somewhat out of place. But that was to be expected, as they were pirates from Renza's anti-government faction, known as the Freedom League, that Maya and her sister had discussed. Of course, Kiriko and the others were well aware of this. Hey, what do you think? You're always the loudest when it comes to anything involving armored cavalry. The young man silently placed his hand on the head of the woman, who was the height of a young girl. Cute, The young man and the short-haired woman seemed a little surprised by the petite woman's murmur. So cute. Those kids are so cute. The petite woman gazed at the armored cavalry with moist eyes, as if she were looking at her favorite idol. Oh, so that means it's the real thing, right? If that's what she says, then it must be true. It seems like it was worth the trouble to come here. Kiriko's speech continued. I have no intention of asking for your loyalty. Your status or origin doesn't matter. However, all who choose to gather here and remain here will have a chance. Come, all of you who have gathered here, use your own strength and talent to win the throne. Kiriko's words caused the excitement of those gathered there to reach its peak. Neither status nor origin mattered. If one demonstrated their abilities, the armored cavalry, which could reach the heavens and even the godly knights, could become theirs.